Today and the next time I'm going to speak to you, I'd like to look at a couple of subjects that are, in my mind, closely related. Firstly, today, what about people who don't know about God and the Bible? And then the next time, I will look to answer, what about good people in other religions? I was inspired to take on these topics after watching a podcast that featured a Canadian Christian. I think he did a very good job, but the podcast is over 3 hours long, and not everybody has time to sit through a 3-hour podcast. So first of all, we will try and answer the question of what does the Bible say about those who don't know about God and the Bible? And these people will, I think, fall into one of two categories. Firstly, those who are from some civilization which is far enough away from Christendom that they have had no interaction with somebody who knows the Bible and has never heard of Jesus. Secondly, those who are of a mental capacity which is not sufficient to understand the good news of Jesus. We will start with what of those who lack the mental capacity to understand the message of the Bible. You might first think of little children, but personally I'm convinced that my knowledge of the nature of God would extend that out to those who are adults in age but lack the mental capacity to understand. After all, God is a just and a loving God. There are two passages that come to mind when we think of little children and their position before God, should they die before they reach the age where they understand their sin nature and the holiness and love of God. We could look at the story of King David in 2 Samuel chapter 12. David's son was sick and eventually he died. When David is told of it, he says this very interesting statement. But now he is dead, why should I fast? Can I bring him back again? I shall go to him, but he will not return to me. David said, I will go to him. David believed in God. He knew that when he died, he would be with God in paradise. But David also said that he would be with his son, which would suggest that his son would be in paradise, despite not knowing about God. The second passage I would like to look at is very disturbing. Jeremiah chapter 19, verses 3 through 5. You shall say, hear the word of the Lord, O kings of Judah and inhabitants of Jerusalem. Thus says the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, behold, I am bringing such disaster upon this place that the ears of everyone who hears of it will tingle, because the people have forsaken me and profaned this place by making offerings in it to other gods, whom neither they nor their fathers nor the kings of Judah have known, and because they have filled this place with the blood of innocents, and have built the high places of Baal to burn their sons in the fire as burnt offerings to Baal, which I did not command or decree, nor did it come into my mind. The Jews in Jeremiah's day were actually killing their own children. God was promising to bring disaster upon them because of this evil act. But notice what God calls these children. He calls them innocents. It is the only time in the whole of the Bible that this term is used. God considered the children to be innocent. So I would conclude from my understanding of God's character and these two passages that those who do not know the difference between right and wrong are not held guilty before God. Does that mean it's good when a child dies? No. Have you not just read what God was promising to do to the people who had killed these innocent children. So we best move on and look at the next group of people. Those who are adults but have never heard of God or the Bible. So what about the tribe in the deepest parts of the rainforest, untouched by Christianity? There are a number of passages that we could turn to try and figure out the position. Romans chapter 2 verse 12 through 15 says this: "For all who have sinned without the law will also perish without the law, and all who have sinned under the law will be judged by the law. For it is not the hearers of the law who are righteous before God, but the doers of the law who will be justified. For when Gentiles who do not have the law by nature do what the law requires, they are a law to themselves, even though they do not have the law. They show that the work of the law is written on their hearts, while their conscience also bears witness, and their conflicting thoughts accuse or even excuse them." In this passage, Paul is talking about the people who know the law given by God to the Jewish people. And you will note that if the individual was not under the law, that is, those who are not Jewish, they would not be held to the standard of the law. So does that mean that the non-Jewish people were automatically accepted by God? Well, no. Look what it says. They show that the law is written on their hearts, because they do know the difference between right and wrong. They are condemned by their own conscience. So man knows that he has done wrong. Anyone who claims they have never done anything wrong is lying to themselves. And that's a dangerous game to play. We as humans, we tend to compare ourselves with others. I might be bad, but I'm not as bad as that guy. Okay, maybe you're not, but what's that got to do with the price of bread? You're still guilty. Stop worrying about others and their position. Start worrying about your own position. A little earlier in Romans 1, verse 18 to 20, Paul writes this: "For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men, who by their unrighteousness suppress the truth. For what can be known about God is plain to them, because God has shown it to them. For his invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world, in the things that have been made, so they are without excuse." So the Bible is saying here that there's enough information revealed in the world around us that if we think about it, we can come up with the idea of there being a God. You can read Aristotle, who's not a Jew nor a Christian, but simply looking at the world around him and making logical conclusions based on those observations, and he came to the belief that there was a God. And in many ways, it was very similar to God as described in the Bible. So how about the Christian God? How does the native tribesperson get to the true God? Acts 17 verse 29 to 30 says this: "Being then God's offspring, we ought not to think that the divine being is like gold or silver or stone, an image formed by the art and imagination of man. The times of ignorance God overlooked, but now he commands all people everywhere to repent." So in the past, God overlooked the failed attempts to understand who God was. But now that we have knowledge of Jesus, now we have a clearer understanding of God's nature and his plan of salvation, we are expected to respond to it. So one could assume that those who have not yet heard of Jesus are judged by God in the same way as the pagans of old. But I want to add another verse into our contemplation on this subject. Matthew chapter 7, verse 7 and 8 says this. Jesus is speaking and he says, "Ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and it will be opened to you. For everyone who asks receives, and the one who seeks finds, and the one who knocks it will be opened." Notice that it says those who seek will find. God will reveal himself to those who earnestly seek for him, enough that they're able to make a decision to trust or reject God. Now, at the moment, there are huge numbers of reports coming out of Islamic countries of Jesus revealing himself to Muslims in dreams and visions. If we look into the Bible, we can see that there are people who were not directly in the line of God's chosen people, but they still chose to follow God. We could think of King Melchizedek. He was king and priest of Salem in the story of Abraham. And Moses' father-in-law, Jethro, he was a priest in Midian. Both these men, and one would assume many others in the town of Salem, believed in God, but had less information than the men and women God had chosen to have as his own people. We could also look at the account of Apollos in Acts 18 and verse 24. Now, a Jew named Apollos, a native to Alexandria, came to Ephesus. He was an eloquent man, competent in the scriptures. He had been instructed in the way of the Lord, and being fervent in spirit, he spoke and taught accurately the things concerning Jesus, though he knew only the baptism of John. He began to speak boldly in the synagogue, but when Priscilla and Aquila heard him, they took him aside and explained to him the way of God more accurately. You will note that he had some knowledge, and he taught what he knew accurately, which he's given credit for. But he was open to further information. I suspect that were he not open to understanding the truth more fully, it would be considered a fault on his part. So if we put these concepts together, we can see that man knows that he has done wrong, no matter where they are in the world, no matter what religion they were raised in. We can also see that there is enough that we can know about God based on the natural world to come to know that there is a God and some of his attributes. We know that God overlooked the ignorance, but he will reveal himself to those who seek for him. We see that the more we know of the truth, the more we have a responsibility to accept it. So enough about them. What about you? You know more about God than the tribes of man. What are you going to do with that information that you have? You know about God, his nature, his plan of salvation. You have access to the Bible. Have you read it? Are you carefully considering it? If not, why not? What could be more important to you than your own eternal future? The peace you can have with God and the peace he can give you in this life. I mean, really, what are you waiting for? This is a serious matter. One that should have your whole attention until you have the truth of it. And then it should impact every decision you make. This is the foundation of every decision you make, or at least it should be. You know that you've done wrong. You know that Jesus died so that you could have a way to avoid the punishment for your wrongdoing and have a relationship with God. You know that you must trust in Jesus and him alone for your salvation. So have you? If not, why not? And I'll leave you with that question. Thanks for watching.